It's my belief that the world will be a much better place when when half of the population isn't spending half of their time and energy and resources battling their bodies every day in this internal struggle. Like, just the freedom and the confidence and the energy you get back. Like, what could we do with all of that?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Kristen Donnelly, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research. At Abbey Research, we deeply believe that everybody changes their minds through stories and relationships, not through shaming or statistics. So we try to create as many opportunities as possible for people to encounter other stories and relationships, because we are all learning how to be human as we go along. Like, we weren't given this massive instruction manual and anyone's an expert at it. We're all figuring it out as we go. And the best way to figure it out is together. So this series is in service of that. It's called Welcome to My World. And I get the opportunity to talk with fascinating folks from all over the place about something in their lives that we all need to learn and know more about. And once we do, we can understand better, our worldviews will expand, and we'll move through the world more empathetically, more curiously, and more inclusively. Today's guests are absolutely no exception to this rule. This is actually the first time I've had two guests on Welcome to My World, so I'm feeling really spoiled today. I would love to welcome Bridget Shannon and Dana Barron. Dana Barron. Dana? What is that? You're a yogurt all of a sudden? Dana Barron help women stop feeling out of control about food. Their work is rooted in body liberation and food freedom, helping women all over the world escape the painful diet binge cycle and embrace true well-being. People who have been watching this channel for a little while know that I talk about my body size and my relationship with food a lot. So I'm very, very excited to have these ladies join us. They have a coaching program. They do writing events, community events. They teach the principles of intuitive eating, health at every size, body neutrality, and holistic wellness. They also interview experts and thought leaders across the industry on their weekly podcast, Wellness Lately, where they explore the incredible work being done to make wellness more accessible and empowering for everybody. I cannot wait for this conversation. Bridget and Dana, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, same. And that was a killer intro.
I know.
Well, it's just reading what you wrote. So we can all own the power of what we've actually accomplished. I would love to kick things off because intuitive eating is a word that is thrown around a lot, especially on Instagram these days. And I don't know if we have a good cultural understanding what it actually is. So could you unpack intuitive eating for us?
Sure. I mean, at its most basic, intuitive eating is eating based on your body's internal cues, eating to taste and hunger and satisfaction, instead of all of the rules of diet culture that have been ingrained in us our entire lives. So it's really eating based on your body's needs instead of the rules in your head.
Yeah. And that is, I'm sure, one of the most revolutionary statements that you can make in most people's lives. Because I'm sure immediately people are like, right, but we have to count calories. And how do I know what's good for my body? And the answer is you'll eventually know what's good for your body once you unlearn everything else, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Our bodies are always fighting to keep us healthy and giving us subtle and blatant cues all day long. And if we can just unlearn what we need to unlearn in order to trust them again, they're not going to lead us in the wrong direction. And it is revolutionary for, especially for, a woman to eat and to eat unapologetically what she wants, when she wants, however much she wants. It is radical in our society, to be honest. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember who originally said it. You guys might know off the top of your head, but essentially that diet culture isn't at all about health. It's entirely about control.
It's Naomi Wolf. Yeah.
Naomi Wolf. There we go. I knew it was a feminist. I couldn't remember which one of the pantheon said it. Yeah. It's Naomi Wolf. Yeah. So what got you into this work?
Bridget.
Well, it's sort of a long winded journey, I guess, but we used to work together for a health coaching company. So it was, I think it was a culmination of our own personal struggles with food and body image. And, I personally grew up in a household that was very weight centric, very quote unquote health conscious. So started struggling with food from a pretty young age and developed disordered eating patterns that lasted a few decades. And so over time, it was as if I was pursuing wellness or health. And the best way to do that is to double down on dieting, right? And to just get better at disordered eating in the name of quote unquote health. So ultimately worked for this health coaching company, became a health coach myself. That's where Dana and I met. And it really was masking a lot of struggles with food and with my body. So it was, constantly feeling inadequate, constantly feeling like I was improving my appearance, right? But called it wellness. And we can talk a little bit about, that's the sneaky diet culture wellness infiltration, right? So long story short, we worked together and started seeing a lot of just this, I think bullshit, for lack of a better term, in the wellness industry, and started working on our own creative outlet. And in the process, realized what was, the sold as the solution for struggles with food was really actually the problem: dieting, right? So that was actually making not only our relationships with food worse, but also the people that we were working with. So we shifted our approach to wellness and health. And long story short, now we are working with women to go through the same process that we did in our own lives, healing our relationship with food and making peace with food and in our bodies, and improving body image in a really practical way. So that's sort of how we got here: a combination of our own stories and struggles, and then also this perspective on the wellness industry and what was actually happening at the root of it, that was actually causing a lot of people a lot of harm.
Yeah. As a recipient of a lot of that industry, it's definitely, I think it's incredibly harmful. So when I think of the word diet culture, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, when I think of that phrase, what I think of what we mean is that the entirety of Western culture, really, but specifically North America, is very geared towards that diets are the standard. They're permissible. We promote them. And therefore, our bodies are things to be controlled instead of enjoyed, and that the culture is built to allow that. And anytime you do anything else, it's countercultural, it's revolutionary. Is that what you guys think of with the phrase diet culture?
Yeah. And I would add to that just the, cultural narrative that we idolize thinness, we idolize Eurocentric beauty standards, and we place food in moral categories, right? So it's not just about it's not just about controlling food. It's about the narratives underneath and why we all believe our bodies are wrong in the first place, and why we believe as women specifically, and I generalize there, I know it affects all genders, but we work exclusively with women. But what is the belief underlying our need to exert control over food? And what it is our belief that our access to love and security and resources and success and confidence is riding on the size of our genes, right? And that we will have a better shot at accessing that life if we are in a thinner body, right? Diet culture idolizes thinness and places food in moral categories. And it's really something to unpack for sure. So I would just add those pieces to it as well.
I'm so glad you brought in the food and moral categories conversation, because when I've talked to people to explain the beginning bits of this, the adage I always tell is one of the first research studies I ever read, where it was word association between France and America, where when you say chocolate cake in France, the word association is celebration, and when you say it in America, it's guilt.
Mm-hmm.
And how we kind of think about that. But Bridget, I want to come back to what you said in your intro about the connection between thinness and wellness, and the almost the inappropriate relationship between those words in the quote unquote wellness industry. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what we've seen is a transition from the overt dieting of perhaps the generation previous to ours, right? The Weight Watchers being rebranded to WW as a lifestyle company, right? We've kind of went from the Atkins diet, South Beach diet to now keto and paleo lifestyle. So it's sort of the same thing, right? But now it's not cool to talk about dieting or weight loss. So we've seen the wellness industry sort of morph into lifestyles and eating better and healthier habits, right? But when we look at it, we're still talking about the same effect, right? We're still talking about how do we lose weight? How do we make ourselves smaller? So it's sort of like, it's this very insidious thing because it's almost trickier to recognize a diet in something like paleo, right? But you're still absolutely being guided by external guidelines, right? And not listening to your own body and your own body's wisdom. So it gets a little trickier to identify, but at the root of it, we're still talking about an industrial complex, right? We're still talking about how does an industry that is making 70 plus $billion and continues to keep growing, how does that portray wellness, right? So we're seeing diet culture in the form of green juice or a cleanse or, going to yoga, right? All of these things that are being labeled as wellness and health, and certainly certain aspects could be health affirming, right? But it's in the name of weight loss. And that's why it's still pretty evident that diet culture is strong and persisting, but it just looks a little different than the overt, counting calories or restricting carbs. But we just see that show up a different way today.
Yeah, because why I'm not allowed to be angry at somebody telling me to drink a smoothie, because we all need more fruits and vegetables, but at the same time, it's still an external control. It's still those kind of things. So I'm wondering, I'm sure one of the things you guys get all the time is like the medical, well, my doctor says I have to lose weight, or isn't that person's unhealthy. So can you kind of walk me through your reactions and your responses to those kind of comments?
Sure. Well, we operate under the paradigm of health at every size, which basically, I mean, it's a complex and large movement, right? Social justice movement around health and body diversity and treatment and dignity. But it's essentially that weight is not a behavior, right? Like weight is not a behavior, and it would be one thing if we had any evidence that controlling food reduces body size and therefore improves health in the long term. And we simply don't have it. Researchers have been trying to prove the one long-lasting right diet for all of us for decades. And it's just the research is just not there. What we do know is that focusing on including health affirming habits into our lives, right? How we're moving, how we're nourishing our bodies, how much sleep we get, stress management, these like habits we can focus on that could lead to health improvement, but they are not necessarily tied and connected to weight loss, right? Like you can improve your health without losing weight, right? Health is not the vehicle to which we can improve our health, right? So I'm sorry, weight is not. So essentially, like, sure, of course, we care about health. We are health coaches, right? But when you are deeply in a disordered relationship with food, your ability to make empowered choices and to take care of yourself is diminished over time, as is your body image, which is another aspect of stress, right? In our lives, we know that self-compassion can improve our health, across the board if we can practice it, right? So essentially, dieting to lose weight is not the avenue for health, right? Because we don't have any research that shows us that, right? So what we can do is we can look at our habits and our practices and how we're nourishing ourselves and try to make improvements there, whether or not we lose weight. So that's the first piece. The second piece at Health at Every Size is that, like Bridget just, spoke about in the wellness industry, there are so many factors that impact an individual's health over time, like housing security, access to food, whether or not you have access to healthcare, right? How much stigma and oppression and racism you face in your life. All of these things have a deep and lasting impact on someone's overall health, but we're not talking about that in the mainstream. We're talking about crystals and lycra and green juice, when in fact, most of us don't have access to those things in the first place. And usually health outcomes improve as socioeconomic status goes up, right? So we're not talking about the things as a society that really impact our health and wellness. So we have to look at the whole person and their entire lives, right? We're not just a number on a scale, and that number on the scale, the size of our body, the way we look, tells us nothing about our health. Does that make sense?
It does.
It's a very complex, thing to respond to.
Well, and thank you for taking a crack. I mean, like, I'm just thinking, like, if 12-year-old Kristen heard that, like, what radical freedom she would experience. And I think there's a difference. The way that I've been trying to explain it to people as I go on my own journey in this is that, like, it is true that my knee joints don't need to have as much weight on them as they currently do. Fine. Okay. But that doesn't mean that losing the weight is the only way to solve that problem or the focus of that problem. And so for me, it's like a mentality shift of what I want to do is have a better relationship with my body and let my body have a better relationship with the world around it. And whatever comes from that is great, but the goal can't be a number on a scale. And for so much of my life, like, it took me a long time, but for me, it was very radical to tell doctors I don't want to know what I weigh. That, like, I don't even know why you need to know it, but fine, you have to. My health insurance says you have to. Fine. I don't want to know it. And so I'm very grateful that all my physicians, respect that. I have no idea what I weigh anymore. And that freedom is insane. Like, insane. For 20 years of my life, I could tell you down to the ounce what I weighed at every single instance. And I hated myself. And it was constantly, every single second of every single day, feeling like I wasn't enough because I had failed in some way to be a good person. And so hearing all of that, I hope that, like, 9, 10, 11, 12 was young enough in the ingrainedness that would have brought freedom. Like, 20-year-old Kristen would have still had a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
But I hope, like, adolescent Kristen could have understood. Like, I look back at the way I thought, I mean, we all have this story, the concept I had of my body at 9, 10, 11. And then I look back now and go, oh my God, like, I was like, that's not what I looked like at all. And things like that. So I think it's so much of this is mindset and deciding from everything you said, to see the world differently than what the world has told you it is. And the world has told you are. It's a constant, I would imagine, decision as well. It is for me anyway.
Yeah, it's a practice. I mean, it's certainly a practice, and it's intuitive eating, as we coach it under the framework of Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, is that it's a process of discovery and unlearning, right? And there's a lot to unpack. Like, the longer you're entrenched in diet culture, the longer you're disordered around food, your own personal trauma and history with food. Maybe you grew up in food scarcity that has a lasting impact on someone's relationship with food, size of your body, oppression, weight stigma, all of it. And, just to go back to your point around the knee pain, because this is like a common thing that comes up with clients too. And it can be very difficult for people to wrap their brains around this. Like, of course, if there weren't as much weight on my knee, wouldn't my knee pain go away? And what we counter that with is that there's plenty of people in very small bodies who also have joint pain and knee pain and back problems. And what is the protocol for those individuals, right? It's usually some sort of physical therapy, working on strength and conditioning and flexibility, right? And we can work on all of those things regardless of the size of our body. And it may lead to weight loss, maybe creating, habits in your life that build strength and conditioning and nourishing your body. Maybe those things do lead to weight loss, but it's the habits and how we're taking care of ourselves that are going to improve that knee pain and probably improve energy and cardiac and all of these things, right? But it should be the same protocol, whether we're in a larger body or a smaller body. Like, what is causing the pain? How do we work through that? And I hope that that makes sense to people, because there is nuance here, right? It's not a straightforward thing. And we as a society, we love sound bites. And when it comes to health and wellness, we can't sum up an individual's experience in a sound bite. So,
Bridget, I see you nodding. Is there anything else you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's, we see that all the time. So if there's people who are listening who have similar sort of objections to this idea, perhaps, right, that I can't possibly, like, of course, weight loss is the solution for any sort of ailment or pain. And we often have to explain, like, weight itself is never a cause of something, right? It can often be a correlation. Perhaps there's something going on that might cause you to gain weight, right? But it's never, we don't necessarily like have an ailment because of weight. It's never a cause. And I think the really challenging part for people like yourself, it sounds like, and certainly was the case for me, is this really deeply ingrained notion that something is wrong with my body that needs to be fixed, right? That started from a young age. I had a really similar situation when I was 12 years old, also being told that my BMI was too high, right? So that sort of was a catalyst for a lot of disordered eating and a lot of pain around how I looked, and trying to, when you're 12, you don't have the ability to filter that, right? You don't have the ability to really challenge this idea that something is wrong with you. We take it at face value.
Yeah.
And I think it also has a lot to do with our conditioning, right? Depending on how we were raised and the people that were around us. So, it's just something that is really still not totally mainstream. And there's just so many people that are in similar situations, right? That were raised by people who believed weight loss is the answer. So of course we're going to find ourselves in our, 20s and 30s struggling with this still. But it is possible with some rewiring and I think the biggest piece of this for me was the body image as well. And we're never going, unless we address the underlying body image, it's going to be really difficult to heal our relationship with food as well, because if we weren't struggling with our body, we wouldn't be struggling with food in the first place. We wouldn't be trying to fix our body with a means through dieting, right? So just to kind of assure people that if they are in that situation, they're not alone. But I think really starting to challenge this idea can be really, really helpful, even if you don't have all the answers, right? Even if you don't have, know what comes next, just this idea alone that perhaps weight is not the cause of all my issues, and it's not the solution. Losing weight is not the solution, can be a really powerful first step in healing all of this.
Yeah. That's not like a blow off answer at all. Like, my brain is spinning. It's a lot of things. I first of all, I think one of the things we all, as I call myself an elder millennial.
Yes, that's what I am too.
So as elder millennials, I think we're, in a very specific sweet spot of this whole thing, where we were young adolescents when like snack wells were a thing, and all of that. And I remember reading somewhere, it might have been in an Aubrey Gordon article, that like we were the first generation put on a diet as children. And people, when I say I got put on a diet at 9, people are horrified. And now like you have lots and lots of people that are like, well, childhood obesity is a problem. And I'm like, okay, well, okay. I'm 20 years into that statement, and let me tell you, it's not helpful to say that.
Yeah, right.
So as the elder millennial, I think a lot about the way that I was constantly, at every juncture, programmed that all I was worth was my body.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very specific to women because, as far as most society is concerned, all we are walking wombs and incubators for the next generation. And so that was, I remember being 14 and people telling me I have to lose weight because I want to get pregnant someday. And I was like,
yeah.
First of all, I don't want to. Second of all, how do you know that? Are you my OB? And third of all, like, what is going on? But it was a totally normal thing to say in the culture that I was in. And even though we mentioned it, we have not unpacked the incredible comorbidities of income inequality and racism and sexism and all of the other things that happen across, especially in these United States, that keeps people in a cycle that is unendingly cruel. to themselves and to their body. So there's so much here to unpack, and I'm looking at the clock and I want to be mindful of your time. So what I would love to know actually now at this point is, what is your favorite part of this work?
Watching women unburden themselves from this, honestly. We have a coaching program. It's a group setting because we think there's something really powerful about being seen and heard in this struggle by others. And watching them have these realizations. And when they come to us on a coaching call and they're like, well, food's just like sort of a non-issue at this point, but like, this is what's coming up for me now. And I realize this. And we're just like, do you realize what you just said? Like, food is a non-issue. And now you want to focus on what's really happening in your life, like who you really are and who you really want to be, or what you really need to work through in your life, that this whole struggle with food in your body was masking, right? So like watching women, it's just like shaking this like lead suit off, right? Where they get to move on with their lives. There's just like this critical moment usually when we're in the coaching process with them. And it's my favorite part by far, just having that feeling of like something clicked for her and like she's never going to look at this the same again. It's just like, it really lights me up. Bridget and I are always crying on coaching calls.
I love
We just
it.
like, that's why we're here, right? The world would be it's my belief that the world will be a much better place when when half of the population isn't spending half of their time and energy and resources battling their bodies every day in this internal struggle. Like just the freedom and the confidence and the energy you get back. Like, what could we do with all of that? Right. Like Naomi Wolf, you talked about before, like dieting is the most potent political sedative ever created. It keeps us small and it keeps us feeling, out of control and unqualified to show up to be who we really want to be. So that's my favorite part, is just like, this is about so much more than food. It's about unleashing women out into the world as who they were meant to be.
I love that. I love that. Bridget, what's your answer?
I mean, really similar, right? It's when we talk about shifting a culture, we are two individuals, but I think a really gratifying piece of this is seeing the impact that this work and this process can have on another individual's life who might affect another individual's life, right? We work with women who, just to give you, a couple examples, like women who leave really terrible jobs when they realize that when they start listening to their intuition and they go do something that really has a meaningful impact. Our marketing director started working for us after being a client because she realized she was putting all of her energy and time and effort into changing her body, but what she really wanted to do was fill a void that was missing around work and her career. We've had women who left really shitty relationships and who, just realized their worth and their value in the world is not around changing their bodies or looking a certain way or trying to achieve this cultural standard, right? And when I think about the women who will have a very different experience because their mothers went through this work. When we're talking about our 12-year-old selves, what would be different for us? And I obviously, am appreciative of where I am and probably wouldn't be doing this work if that wasn't my past. But a little girl might not have that struggle because her mom took the time to heal her relationship with food and change the way that she related to her body. And so what's possible for that little girl if she doesn't spend the next 20 years trying to muster all her energy into fixing her body, right? So when we talk about the impact, I think that's sort of the most gratifying piece for me, is that maybe, every single day doing this doesn't feel like we're changing the world, but we are contributing in some way to the outcome and the quality of life that another woman might have and might be different for them as well, which is really, when we stop to think about it, it's a really, really gratifying piece of this.
Yes, because food is a generational trauma.
Yes.
And that's especially, it has been forever because humans have never had a fully globally appropriate relationship with it, probably since we started fencing in the commons in the 1200s. So it's a generational trauma we've all still got to work through. And I'm
Mhm.
so glad that people like you are on the front lines. So
Thank you.
this has been my favorite conversation in a minute. So thank you so much for joining me. I love talking about these kind of things. Pals, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please give it a thumbs up on the old YouTube. The algorithm is obsessed with those thumbs ups, and I really do appreciate them. If you like these kind of sprawling conversations about theory and personal stories and how we change the world, then you'll love the rest of our channel. So hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss a single one. Bridget and Dana, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. It was so nice to chat about all of this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, everyone watching, I'm Kristen Donnelly. My guests are Bridget Shannon and Dana Barron. All of their contact information is going to be in the show notes below this video. Do not hesitate to get in touch or comment below on the video, and I'll make sure they see it. Like I said, I'm Dr. Kristen Donnelly. Bridget and Dana have joined me today. This has been Welcome to My World, and I'll see you next time. Bye.